Hello dear viewers, support me by subscribing to my channel and share my video if you like it, and also make sure you comment your thought. Now let's start the video. Bardock winced in pain as he took another step. It felt like he'd broken some ribs during that fight, probably bruised some vital organs as well, from the feel of it. Nappa hadn't really been that hard to beat, but the big brute had packed a mean punch. He probably shouldn't be walking around right now, but he didn't exactly have much of a choice. He and the boys needed to find some place to hide for the next day or so. Bardock was taking them to such a place now. "Are you okay, Bardock-san?" Trunks asked as the older Saiyan bit back another gasp of pain. He'd be damned before he admitted his weakness, especially since it was something as insignificant as pain. "Just fine," he grunted, pushing aside a tree branch. He wished they could fly to where they were going, but that wasn't possible. You had to use your ki to fly, and if they used ki, any Saiyan with a scouter would be able to find them. Thus, they had to resort to traveling on foot. "Just a little sore, that's all," he lied. One look at Trunks and Goten's faces told him that they didn't believe a word of it. Thankfully, though, neither one called his bluff. He felt that he needed to be strong for them, since he was the only adult. Even if they were physically stronger than him, they were still children who needed someone to be in charge. It wouldn't do if they had to carry their so-called leader to their new hiding place. "How much farther, Grandpa?" Goten asked. It wasn't that he was complaining. He asked because he was worried about Bardock. He recognized the stubborn Saiyajin pride for what it was, and hoped that Bardock had enough sense to know his limits and not let his pride rule his actions. "Not too far," Bardock replied. "It should be over this next hill." Just as they neared the top of the hill, Goten's ears pricked up. Was that running water he heard? He sniffed the air experimentally. Yes, he could smell water in the air. They must be nearing a stream or a river. His suspicions were confirmed when he reached the top of the hill and looked down on a small valley which was bisected by a curving river. The plants on either side of the river suddenly grew taller and greener, or redder in the case of some plants that had red leaves instead of green, and the air seemed fresher somehow. Bardock smiled at the looks of wonder on the boys' faces. "If you go downstream a bit, there's a waterfall with a cave hidden behind it that should make a good place to hide. I used to play here when I was younger. The river provides water and fish, as well as a kind of moss that really tastes pretty good once you wash all the river mud out of it." His eyes lost focus as his thoughts drifted back to those days of relative innocence. Shaking his head to clear it of the memories, he continued, "After we check the cave out to make sure it's still there and that there hasn't been a cave-in, you two can go catch some fish for breakfast." "You do know how to fish, right?" I do. Goten jumped up and down in excitement. "Dad and me have gone fishing lots of times." Three Saiyan stomachs rumbled at the thought of fresh fish, and it was all the boys could do to keep themselves from running ahead in excitement. Bardock chuckled at their childlike enthusiasm, then winced as pain shot through his chest. "Damn it. Now I'm sure I broke at least one of my ribs, and that rib seems to be poking into one of my lungs. I need to stop moving around as soon as possible, before I get a punctured lung. That would be bad, especially without access to any regeneration tanks." Taking a painful breath, he moved on, heading downstream towards the roar of the waterfall and the refuge that it held. Growling in frustration, the young Prince Vegeta impatiently flicked his tail around his waist as he left the throne room. "Where's that idiot Nappa?" he mentally raged. Nappa hadn't reported in since early this morning. It was nearly noon, and no sign of the errant bodyguard was to be found. More frustrating than that was the feeling of actually being in charge. Until recently, he had always taken orders from someone else, even if that person was his father. Someone had always been higher up than him. Yes, people listened to him and obeyed his commands, unless countermanded by the late King Vegeta or the late Frieza. But this was different. Now he was actually expected to take command. No questions asked. Vegeta didn't know if he was ready for this kind of responsibility. On top of all that, he was expected to remain behind, safe and sound, like a coward. Everyone else would be taking the risks and having all the fun, and the Chibi Prince wanted nothing more than to join them in the search for the three fugitives. The Prince of all Saiyans wearily trudged up to his room. He would never admit such weakness. But he missed his father. Bitterly, he recalled that Frieza had killed his father. He was glad the murdering alien bastard was dead, but in a way, he wished it were otherwise. He would never be able to have revenge against the one who had wronged him, his family, his people. Hell, Frieza had wronged the whole universe. Vegeta flopped onto his bed, letting his depression get the better of him. His mind wandered over the past day or so, stopping as he came to the point where that strange purple-haired Saiyan boy had popped into the throne room out of nowhere. Something about that boy bothered him. He seemed eerily familiar to the prince, as though he should know him, but couldn't remember where he had seen him. He could swear that he'd never met the Gaki before, nor had he heard of anyone with such a ridiculous name as Trunks, but the feeling that he knew the boy could not be dismissed. He almost acted like he knew me, the spiky-haired prince mused to himself. He even seemed pleased to see me there. Why is that, I wonder? Sitting up suddenly in a gesture of frustration, the Sierra-Gen-No prince made up his mind. He was going to go out and personally search for Bardock, Kakarot, and Trunks, and no one could stop him. He was, after all, in charge, and if he couldn't command his subjects to allow him to participate in the hunt himself, then what good was having power? Bardock leaned gratefully against the cool, slanted stone wall, breathing in the cool, moist air of his childhood lair. Everything was as he remembered it. Light filtered in through the rushing water, playing on the walls and floor in ever-changing patterns. Moss grew everywhere, some green, some orange, some yellow, all emitting a soft, earthy smell. The large, flat rock he had often used as a makeshift table sat to one side of the puddle that had formed in the center of the cave. It was perfect. Except for one thing. Bardock was in pain. Each breath hurt more than the last, making him wonder if his ribs had splintered and a shard of bone had worked its way into his left lung. He cursed himself for an idiot. He had known that walking with broken ribs was asking for trouble, but had ignored himself in favor of his damned Saiyan pride. Now he was suffering the consequences. At least the boys weren't there to see him like this. They had immediately taken off to go fishing, promising to come back with the biggest fish Bardock had ever seen. The warrior smiled at the memory. Sighing, he reflected that staying still helped ease the pain somewhat. He truly hoped that he was wrong in his assessment of his ribs. Broken ribs healed. A bone shard in his lung was another matter entirely. Such things took regeneration tanks, and occasionally an actual surgery had to take place to remove the offending sliver. If such was the problem in his case, he knew that he would be in trouble. He had no access to either a regen tank or a skilled physician. Closing his eyes, he did the only thing he could do. Sleep. Trunks, I'm worried, Goten whined as he lugged the cow-sized fish back to the waterfall cave. He could have caught a bigger one, but Trunks had reminded him that the cave was only so big. If they were still hungry, they'd just have to go catch more. Grandpa didn't look so good when we left him. I think maybe he got hurt when he was fighting that ugly guy. Trunks gave his friend a sidelong look. He had noticed that Bardock was a few shades paler than he should have been, and that he seemed to be trying to hide his pain from the two chibis. Trunks knew that he was far from fine, despite what the older Saiyajin said. He was slightly surprised, however, that Goten had also noticed his grandfather's condition. I think you're right, Goten, the older boy stated, concern evident in his voice. I think Bardock-san was lying when he said he was all right. You know, to keep us from worrying, Goten nodded solemnly. I don't know what to do, Trunks, he pined. I don't want my grandpa to die. He's not gonna die, Baka. Trunks protested. Our dads have been hurt worse before and lived, remember. But our dads are stronger than my grandpa, Trunks? The younger boy whimpered. Quit being such a baby. Goten, the purple-haired Demisane, chided. Your grandpa will be fine, trust me. Sniffling, Goten nodded, though he remained pensive for the rest of the trip back to the cave. Both boys dropped their fish on top of the large flat rock that served as a table. Goten was immediately by Bardock's side, worriedly looking into the older Saiyajin's face. Bardock was asleep, his face pale and drawn, his breath coming in shallow gasps. This, of course, did nothing to soothe the younger boy's fears. Goten's eyes welled up with tears as he turned to look at his friend. Trunks, he looks even worse than before, he cried softly. Hiding his own worry for the sake of his friend, Trunks scowled at Goten. I told you, he'll be fine. He just needs something to eat. You know how bad it feels to be hungry, don't you? Goten nodded, though he was only half convinced that this was the real problem. I guess we should cook that fish, huh, Trunks? Trunks nodded sharply and set about attempting to fry both fish. Cooking with Kiki Blasts wasn't really the best idea, but they didn't have any wood nearby. Neither boy wanted to wait the time it would take to gather the necessary firewood in case it was hunger that was making Bardock look so terrible. Trunks took a deep breath, then carefully gathered a small amount of Kiki. Even if a scouter was pointed in their direction, the amount of Kiki being used was so insignificant that it would barely register. It was enough, though, to completely fry both fish, charring the edges slightly. The older boy eyed the fish warily, then shrugged. Goten, wake your grandpa up. Hi, Trunks-kun. Goten put a hand on Bardock's chest and gently shook him. Unfortunately, he placed his hand directly over the ribs that had been cracked during the fight with Nappa. Bardock screamed in agony, his face contorting in intense pain. Panicking, Goten pulled his hand away and gripped it with his other hand. Grandpa, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I swear, he whimpered. Panting heavily, the wounded Saradi opened his eyes and forced his lips into a smile, which looked more like a grimace of pain. Yay, Goten-chan. Don't worry about it. You didn't hurt me too badly. As naive as he was, even Goten didn't believe a word of it. His eyes watered and tears slid down his cheeks. I was only trying to wake you up, Grandpa, he sobbed, so you could eat and get better. I didn't mean to hurt you. Bardock reached out and ruffled his grandson's spiky black hair affectionately, his smile becoming more genuine as the pain subsided to a dull throb. It's all right, it's okay, he murmured. I forgive you. I know you didn't mean it. He sniffed the air, the scent of cooked fish tickling his nostrils. I smell fish, he stated, the obvious in an attempt to change the subject. Trunks, who had up until this point remained silent, took the opportunity to speak. Hey, Goten and I caught 2 big fish, and I cooked them, he said proudly. It was a well-known fact that his family had difficulty cooking, and that was understating things immensely. He grabbed one of the fish and brought it over to Bardock. Here, you need to eat so you can get better, Bardock. Chuckling weakly, Bardock gestured to the other fish. Will that be enough for the 2 of you? Wiping his tears away, Goten smiled at the older man. Probably not, but we can always catch more, right, Trunks? Right. Bardock, Goten, and Trunks all began to eat ravenously. Hunger overrode Bardock's pain, enabling him to eat despite the complaints his chest gave him. Once his stomach was full, Bardock settled back against the wall and drifted off into sleep again. Goten and Trunks had gone to get more fish and maybe forage for some fruit or the moss that Bardock had told them about. Status report. Estimated time to arrival is 19 hours, 22 minutes, sire. Good. Soon we will be there, and I can avenge my son. Smirking with glee, the prince of all Jin flew off in the direction of the location that Nappa had last reported from. Decked out in full battle armor, complete with a flowing red cape, the boy made an impressive figure, despite the fact that he was just a boy. Behind him, 4 more Jins follow, also dressed in their finest battle gear. With the air whistling through hair that looked like a black flame, the prince grinned predatorily. It was time to go Cian hunting. The stench was awful. Burned flesh and rotting meat were definitely not on Vegeta's list of favorite scents, but that was exactly what he faced. As he stared down into the crater at the remains of what had once been his bodyguard, Nappa. Well, he had been wondering why Nappa hadn't reported in yet. He had his answer now. Refusing to allow the smell to affect him, the young prince paced forwards until he was only a few feet from the body. He examined it in hopes of discovering some clue as to how he had met this fate. Broken bones, seared flesh, ravaged terrain, and a dozen other signs pointed at a brutal battle against a skilled opponent. Not the boy Kakarot, though. If Nappa had fought against Kakarot, Vegeta guessed that there would be no body and fewer signs of battle. The fight would have been over too quickly to cause this kind of damage. No, this then had to be the work of either Bardock or the pale-haired boy, Trunks. The prince had no idea how strong Trunks was, but he knew that Bardock had been a fighter for all of his life. A fairly strong one for a third-class warrior if the reports were right. If Vegeta had been in a betting mood, he would have wagered that it was Bardock that Nappa had fought against. With nothing more to discover, the chibi prince turned away, his face emotionless. Search for any nearby powers, no matter how small, he ordered. If he was right and Bardock had been the one to fight against Nappa, he was probably injured. His power would be low and he would not have been able to go very far without assistance. The 2 boys might be with him, but the one seemed to have the ability to raise his ki dramatically from a low base ki. Either that or he had some method or device that allowed him to hide it. And the other had never had his power read. Trunks could be pathetically weak for all they knew. Any of the three that Vegeta sought could have a current power low enough to normally be dismissed out of hand. He would not make that mistake. He would find those three, and he would have his answers. "I am picking up 3 key signatures, Prince Vegeta," one of his escorts stated. "One is 2002-05, and the other 2, who are farther away, are 420 and 49-5. The Saiyan warrior pointed in the general direction of the 3 powers. Vegeta frowned. The highest of the 3 keys was more than 200 points lower than Kakarot's before he'd powered up. Perhaps he had been injured by Nappa, or maybe the scouter had malfunctioned. No matter the reason, however, there was only one way to find out. He nodded once, sharply. "We will head for the nearest one first, then track down the other 2. Out of curiosity, he attached his own scouter to his ear. Normally, he let his guards read powers and do the tracking themselves, as it was beneath the prince to do such menial work. But he didn't want to voice his question out loud. Pressing a button on the scouter, he located the 3 cakes in question. 2 remained steady and were moving around. The third and closest and weakest one remained immobile, its numbers slowly dropping. His curiosity satisfied, Vegeta levitated up into the air and headed towards the nearest key. He smirked. It looked like he had been right. Someone, Vegeta guessed it was Bardock, had been mortally wounded and now lay dying. It was hard to resist the urge to eat everything that they had gathered, but somehow Trunks and Goten managed. They still ate some of the nuts, berries, fruits, and other assorted plants that Bardock had pointed out as being edible while they had trekked to the waterfall. But it wasn't really enough to satiate the 2 Saiyan appetites. Nonetheless, they had agreed that half of whatever they found would be saved, to either be given to Bardock or to be stashed away inside one of Trunks' capsules. Once they left the planet, they would need a lot of food to last them until they got to Namek or to Earth. Trunks still had some capsules filled with food, but he felt that they would need more. "I think we have enough gathered to fill another capsule, Trunks," Goten said, staring hungrily at the mound of food. They'd already filled 1 capsule with key-fried fish. Smiling, the lavender-haired boy put his hand into his pocket to retrieve his capsule case. His fingers came in contact with the case, only to find that it had somehow opened and had spilled its contents into his pocket. He muttered a curse, too low for Goten's ears to hear, and had to grab a handful of capsules from his pocket, searching for one that was empty. He found more than just capsules. Trunks' eyes widened as he saw what his hand held. "Goten," he yelled, causing his friend to jump nearly 10 feet into the air. "Don't do that, Trunks! You scared me!" Ignoring his friend's glare of annoyance, Trunks danced around jubilantly with his fist in the air. "I totally forgot I had these. I'm such an idiot. Goten, we didn't ever have to worry about your grandpa at all." Goten looked at Trunks as though he had gone crazy. "What are you talking about, Trunks?" Trunks stopped his celebration dance and held out his hand, palm open, to show his friend what he had just found. Mixed in with the capsules were 2 small, hard, brown beans. Senzu beans. "I've been saving these for a while now. When I packed my things to go to Namek, I put them in my pocket, since I didn't know if I'd need them or not. I guess I forgot about them. But that's not the point." The older boy grinned like an idiot. "The point is that we can give one of these to your grandpa." The younger Demi Saiyan's eyes also widened at the realization. A large grin spread across his face. "Come on, Trunks. Get that food put in a capsule and let's get back to my grandpa," he shouted excitedly. As his friend threw a capsule at the food, Goten continued. "Hey, Trunks. I bet my grandpa's never seen a Senzu bean before. I bet he'll..." The black-haired Saiyan cut himself off, his eyes wide with horror. Trunks picked up the now full capsule and glanced at Goten to see why he had stopped. "What is it, Goten? What's wrong? Don't you sense it, Trunks?" Goten's eyes swiveled and focused on a spot somewhere in the distance. "Your dad's key. It's getting closer." Trunks extended his senses to find that Goten was right. The younger version of his father was getting closer. "He's heading straight for your grandpa, Goten," he yelled in alarm. "We've got to stop him before he gets there, or he'll kill Bardock." Throwing caution to the wind, the 2 boys launched themselves into the sky and raced back to where Bardock remained hidden. "Please don't let us be too late. Please let us get there before Vegeta does," Trunks silently prayed. The beauty of the scenery was lost upon the young Prince Vegeta as he stared at the roaring waters that cascaded over the cliff. According to the scouters, the key they were seeking lay somewhere within the waterfall. There was probably a cave hidden behind the deluge of water. Vegeta grinned predatorily in anticipation. He had found his quarry, and now he could begin the pleasurable process of extracting the answers he desired. He floated slowly up along the side of the falling waters, looking for the cave where his prey was hiding. There, a dark recess, mostly hidden from view, caught the prince's eye, and he grinned again. His 4 companions hovered behind him as he drifted towards the cave, only to stop short, as 2 small forms suddenly flashed in between Vegeta and the cave. The 2 Saiyan boys faced the 4 adults and the prince, everyone in a fighting stance and eyeing each other warily. Vegeta's obsidian eyes met the blue eyes of the odd purple-haired Saiyan boy, and again he felt like he should know the kid. Goten, Bardock's ki is getting really low. I don't think he's got much longer. Here, the boy paused and shoved something that Vegeta couldn't see into Kakarot's hand. Give this to him. I'll hold off Vegeta and his men. But Vegeta's your... Can it, Goten? Trunks barked. Bardock needs you. I'll be fine, don't worry. Now go on. Interesting. What had Kakarot, or was it Goten, been about to say? Vegeta was Trunks a lot. Vegeta felt sure that it had something to do with the mysterious feeling that he knew Trunks from somewhere. The black-haired Chibi Saiyan cast a look at Vegeta and Trunks, then flew off into the cave, vanishing from view. That left the Prince of the Saiyans to face this disturbing boy. Folding his arms, he glared at Trunks with all the pride that the prince of the mightiest warrior race could hold, which was a rather considerable amount. Who are you? He asked bluntly. Maybe he could figure out what it was that bothered him about this boy by talking to him. Trunks, came the simple reply. Not satisfied, the Chibi Prince pressed on. I know you from somewhere, and you know me. I want to know how, and you will tell me, he said, haughtily. Yeah, right, the boy snorted. Why would I have to tell you anything? I am the Saiyajin no Aji. Vegeta yelled angrily. You must obey my commands. If you will not willingly tell me what I want to know, I will arrange to have you tortured slowly until you are begging for the opportunity to tell me. Get over yourself, Veggie-chan, Trunks mocked. Man, I have wanted to say that for so long, he snickered inwardly. He watched with sinister glee as his chibi father's eyes started twitching and his face turned 5 shades of red. With a roar of unbridled rage, the young prince attacked Trunks all out, his power surging through his veins wildly, his face a mask of fury. As Goten's eyes adjusted to the darker interior of the cave, his gaze fell upon his grandfather, and he felt his heart freeze inside his small chest. Bardock lay on his back, his face turned to one side with his mouth hanging open slightly. One hand rested on his broken ribs in a vain attempt to soothe the pain. Blood soaked the ground near Bardock's mouth and covered the man's lips. A weak cough caused more blood to trickle from Bardock's mouth, pooling with the rest of the blood on the ground. His ki was so low that Goten had to strain to feel it. The young boy felt tears welling in his eyes as he choked back a sob. Kneeling beside his grandfather, he placed his small hand on Bardock's broad chest and shook him slightly. Tears slid down his cheeks, falling to splash lightly on his grandfather's face. Grandpa? Goten's voice trembled as he shook the warrior again. Grandpa? It's me. Goten. Grandpa, I have something for you. The tears were coming faster now, and Goten's body shook with suppressed sobs. Bardock's eyelids fluttered slightly, then slowly lifted halfway. After a moment, the inky eyes beneath focused on Goten, and the trace of a smile graced Bardock's lips. Goten, he whispered, one hand weakly lifting to wipe the tears from his grandson's face. I'm sorry, I didn't get you home, Wish. He stopped as another fit of coughing overtook him and more crimson fluid spilled from his mouth. Don't speak, Grandpa, the Demi-Saiyan pleaded. Here, just eat this. He tried to put the bean into Bardock's mouth, but Bardock shook his head. I'm not that hungry anymore, he chuckled weakly. But thank you, Goten. Glad I met you. Breathing shallowly, he closed his eyes, still smiling as his hand fell limply to his side. No, Grandpa, don't leave me. Goten screamed, shoving the senzu bean into Bardock's mouth, sobbing uncontrollably. No! Goten's scream of pure grief shattered the air, startling Trunks. Vegeta smirked as Trunks let his guard down briefly, distracted by the noise. His fist plowed into the younger boy's jaw and knocked him back several feet. Trunks' eyes flashed in annoyance and he landed briefly on the ground, using the rebound to launch himself back at the younger version of his father. Faster than Vegeta could follow, The lavender-haired child grabbed the prince in a headlock too strong for Vegeta to even hope to break. The arrogant prince struggled vainly against his captor's grip. Trunks would have none of it. He fisted one hand and brought it down sharply against Vegeta's temple. The chibi prince instantly went limp. "Listen here," Trunks glared angrily at the four supposed guards. "If you four don't get lost right now, I'll kill the prince. Go back and tell whoever would be in charge now that if you guys keep chasing us, Vegeta's as good as dead. It was a bluff, of course. He would never kill his own father, but they didn't know that." Trunks resisted the urge to look anxiously at the cave. Something was wrong. He couldn't feel Bardock's ki anymore, and Goten's ragged screams were still going strong. He needed to get rid of these idiots now. Charging up a lethal ball of ki, he held it dangerously close to Vegeta's head. "What are you morons just standing there for?" he shouted, sounding uncannily like Vegeta at that moment. "Get out of here before I blast his head off." The increase in ki was enough to blow the scouter of one of the Saiyans who had accidentally left it on, informing the guards that this was no ordinary boy, and this boy held their prince hostage, threatening to kill him unless they cooperated. Growling, all four reluctantly took to the skies. Not wasting another second, Trunks zipped into the cave and dropped Vegeta unceremoniously onto the floor. Goten was still screaming wordlessly, his face buried in Bardock's chest, his hands gripping the folds of his grandfather's sea-green shirt. Bardock himself lay unmoving, no rise and fall of his chest, no coughing, no kike. To all senses, he appeared to be dead. The Demisaiyan vision became blurry and he tried to blink away the tears. Slowly, he walked up behind Goten and rested a hand on his friend's shoulder. Goten ignored him, cries still coming from his raw throat. Trunks felt so helpless. He could do nothing to ease the pain his friend was suffering. Nothing besides stay at Goten's side and offer silent support. A few minutes later, Goten's screams had subsided to heartbroken sobs. Trunks sat next to the still unconscious Vegeta, trying to come to terms with Bardock's death. Outside, the sky began to darken slightly, signaling the coming of night. Somewhere off in space, a 15-year-old boy frowned as he sat down in a clearing. Everything around him was still as death. An ominous sense of foreboding filled the air, as even the insects quieted. Something was not right, but he didn't know what. He was currently in the middle of clearing a planet with perhaps half the population destroyed, and the other half cowering in fear. But it wasn't the mission that was going wrong. It was something more distant, and yet closer than anything else. The boy shivered, and not from cold. Searching his troubled mind, he tried to pinpoint the source of his disquiet. It wasn't the mission. It wasn't his ship. It wasn't the planet. What was it? Shaking his head, he ran his fingers through his wild, spiky mane of hair that fell to his knees. He had inherited his hair from his mother, though he had his father's face. His father, Raditz, frowned as he thought of his father. That was the source of his unease. Was something wrong with his father? That was ridiculous. Not the thought that something might be wrong with Bardock, but rather the thought that he would somehow know if something was wrong with him. Nonetheless, the teenage Saiyan could not shake the feeling that he was needed back at home. Despite the fact that his mission was still incomplete, Raditz headed back to his ship. He could always come back and finish the job later. Somehow, he knew that whatever was wrong at home, it couldn't wait. If he left for planet Vegeta now, he might be able to get there by noon of the next day on planet Vegeta. He hoped that would be soon enough. Tears on his face. Not his own. Whose tears were they? Someone was crying, calling out something that he could barely make out. A small, warm hand on his chest, shaking him. Whose hand was it? "Grandpa, it's me, Goten. Grandpa, I have something for you." Goten, "I remember now, child of my son. You're not supposed to exist yet, but you're here. Why are you crying?" "Oh, it's because I'm dying, isn't it?" "You don't need to cry. It doesn't hurt anymore." He opened his eyes so he could look at his grandson. The little face that looked so much like his own was so sad, tears were coursing their way down his cheeks to fall lightly onto Bardock's face. "You shouldn't cry, Goten. Tears are not for you. I'm glad you're here, at my side. I don't have much longer, I know, and if there were anyone I would like to have at my side when I die, it's you." Smiling faintly, he reached out to wipe the tears from Goten's face. "I'm sorry. I didn't get you home. Wish I could be there for you, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. I really am sorry that I can't keep my promise to you, Goten. Promised you I would get you back home. I can only hope that you manage to find a way home without my help. Coughing, he spit out more blood. Really messed myself up this time. Bone shard in my lung. What a way to die. Goten was speaking again. What's he saying? It's getting harder to hear. Getting darker too. But maybe it's just nighttime. Speak, Grandpa, his grandson was saying. Here, just eat this. Does he still think that I'm just hungry? That food will make me better? I'm sorry, child, but I don't think there's any food out there that can help me now. He shook his head, refusing whatever it was that his grandson was trying to give him. Only have a few more moments. I want to spend the time talking to you, not chewing on food. I'm not that hungry anymore, he chuckled weakly. Well, maybe I am a little hungry, but food is hardly the most important thing right now. But thank you, Goten. Glad I met you. Maybe we'll see each other again someday, though I hope for your sake that that day is a long time in coming. I guess it's time now. I can barely see, so I might as well close my eyes. Toma, Salipa, Pambukin, Totepo, Jenen, soon I'll see all of you again. Wish it didn't have to be so soon. Would have liked to spend more time to Goten. His hand fell away from Goten's face. The kid was screaming now, screaming his lungs out. No, Grandpa. Don't leave me. He's putting something in my mouth. Can't taste it. Maybe because it has no taste. Or maybe because I'm dying and just can't taste anything. All I know is that it's small and hard. Don't know that I have the strength even to bite into it. But it's the last thing you'll ever give me, isn't it? It seems so important to you. You're my grandson, and yes, I love you, little Goten. I'll eat it for you. Goten's anguished cries covered the tiny sound of something hard cracking. Goten had fallen asleep, still burying his face into Bardock's chest. His grief had exhausted him completely, though even in his sleep, tears still trickled from his closed eyes. Trunks sat with his arms folded across his knees, watching over his chibi friend. Guilt clawed at his heart. If only he'd remembered the senzu beans earlier. If only he'd made Bardock let them carry him. If only they had gone Super Saiyan in order to get there faster. If only there was so many things he felt he could have done to prevent what had happened. Sighing, he noticed that Vegeta was stirring. He hadn't hit him that hard, really, just hard enough to knock him out. Guess now he had to deal with his royal pain in the rear. It was comforting to know that if Vegeta got on his nerves too much, he could always just knock him out again. He'd have to be careful not to do that too much, though. Didn't want to give his father brain damage or anything. Vegeta groaned as he rolled over onto his back, staring blankly up at the ceiling. It took several moments before he recalled what had happened. The boy with the purple hair had challenged him, refusing to answer his questions. Then he had called him Veggie-chan. The mere thought of the insulting name shot bolts of anger through the prince's mind, and he sat up straight, glaring around the room until he found the Gaki in question. Trunks was sitting a few feet from him, staring at him calmly. If you attack me or Goten, I will knock you out again, the younger boy stated in a matter-of-fact tone of voice. His jaw clenching with suppressed rage, the Saiyan boy nodded once, indicating that he understood. His brief encounter with Trunks had left him with the information that Trunks was quite capable of carrying out his threat, and that Vegeta would not be able to do anything to stop him. Vegeta shivered. First Goten, now Trunks. Two children, both younger than him, who could easily overpower him, and probably every other Saiyajin on the planet. How? He tore his gaze off of Trunks, looking instead at Goten and Bardock. Bardock lay still, blood staining the ground, and his shirt and the little look-alike was sleeping half on top of him. His face turned away from Vegeta. Vegeta mentally congratulated himself on being right when he had guessed that Bardock had been wounded. He wisely kept this comment to himself. His captor didn't appear to be in a very good mood. So what do you intend to do with me? He asked, not looking at Trunks. Stretching lazily, the purple-haired Saiyan gave Vegeta a hard look. In a way, it's kinda your fault Bardock's dead, since you're the one who sent that guy after us, he said bitterly. Maybe I should kill you. Trunks wouldn't actually kill Vegeta, but he wanted to see his chibi father's reaction to this statement. Besides, killing Vegeta would not bring Bardock back and would prevent Trunks from ever having a chance of being born in this timeline. With planet Vegeta undestroyed, the chances of that were already slim to none. No need to eliminate them entirely. The reaction he got was not the one he was expecting. Vegeta's eyebrows shot up in surprise as he looked at the still form of the older warrior. "You think he's dead?" he spluttered, nearly bursting with laughter. "Bakagaki, are you blind or something? Any fool who bothered to look at that lowly third class could tell he's still alive." Time almost seemed to stop for Trunks as he absorbed this information, looking as though he'd just been hit by a ton of bricks, or a strong Keeble blast. He jerked to his feet and stumbled over to where Bardock and Goten lay, falling to his knees as he looked at Bardock's face in disbelief. The little cuts and scrapes that he'd earned from his fight with Nappa were gone. Blood still covered his mouth and trailed down his cheek, but it was old blood. No new blood was joining it. And he was breathing. Slowly, yes, but it was the kind of breathing done while one is sleeping, and not the shallow gasps he'd been taking a short time ago. Trunks reached out to touch the man's face and found that it was warm and soft, not cold and stiff. "He's alive," he whispered, hardly daring to voice the fact in case it was a dream. The dream remained reality, and Trunks leapt up and shouted, grinning from ear to ear as tears of joy sprang to his eyes. "He's alive." To the prince's surprise and annoyance, Trunks grabbed him up and gave him a hug, so strong it nearly cracked some of his ribs. The boy let go, his eyes shining, grinning like an idiot. "Yes, and now that you've told the whole world, perhaps you'd like to go tell the rest of the universe." The young prince growled sarcastically. "How dare he? How dare he touch the Saiyajin no Uji? How dare he hug the royal heir to the throne?" Trunks ignored him. He was busy chattering to himself. Goten must have given Bardock the senzu bean, and it just took Bardock a little bit to bite and swallow it. And I guess he was too distracted to notice that his grandfather's ki hadn't disappeared. I stopped trying to sense his ki when it got too low for me to feel, so I didn't notice it when it came back. Now that I'm looking, I'm surprised I didn't feel it sooner, even if I wasn't paying attention. "What the hell are you talking about, boy?" Vegeta muttered angrily. He didn't understand most of what Trunks had been saying, but he had caught one thing. "I thought that brat was the son of that third-class lowlife. Bardock doesn't even look old enough to have grandchildren." That stopped Trunks in his tracks. Scowling, he mentally pulled up some of his father's favorite curses, the kind that made Bulma threaten to make Vegeta sleep on a couch if he ever used them again, and applied them to himself. He'd accidentally referred to Bardock as Goten's grandfather. How would he explain that to the suspicious prince? He paused in his frantic search for plausible lies when he heard Vegeta gasp. Vegeta was staring at Trunks, his mouth hanging open slightly, and his eyes wide with shock. When Trunks had scowled after the prince had asked his question, Vegeta suddenly realized where he felt he knew Trunks from. With his purple eyebrows scrunched down and his mouth set in a firm frown, his face perfectly matched what the black-haired Saiyajin saw every day in the mirror. "You're me!" he exclaimed. The boy was about to say something, but Vegeta cut him off. "I don't know how it's possible, but I recognize your face now. It's my face." Trunks snorted in derision. "And you call me an idiot? Good grief. Listen to yourself, Baka. How can I be you? I have purple hair, and I'm younger than you, and I'm stronger than you ever were. Though maybe not as strong as you'll be when you grow up," Trunks added silently. The logic of what Trunks had said penetrated the shock-induced stupor the prince found himself in. He mentally shook himself, blinking, and focused on the other boy's hair. "Speaking of your hair, how in hell did you get purple hair? And why is it so limp?" Curiosity pushed aside any fear or anger he had at the moment, as well as causing him to dismiss the reference to his relative weakness. He reached out a hand to touch the strange locks. Trunks just stood there awkwardly, a faint flush of embarrassment tinging his cheeks pink. "I get my hair from my mom," he muttered, smiling faintly. "Dad thinks it looks silly too." "Who is your father?" Vegeta asked, withdrawing his hand and sitting down on the cold stone floor. Silence. "Then I'd rather not say." Smiling triumphantly, the prince leaned back against the wall. "You're related to me somehow, aren't you?" "I can tell. Your face looks too much like mine to be coincidence, and I've been having this feeling that I know you ever since I first saw you. Come on, you can tell me." That earned him a rather strange look from Trunks. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Trust me. You can't be a cousin, since my father never had any siblings, and neither did my mother." Vegeta speculated out loud. "Wait, I know. My father mated with another female and produced you." You don't want me to feel bad about my father, so you're trying to hide the fact that you're his bastard son, am I right? He looked at Trunks expectantly, hoping to catch a glimpse of some sign that indicated he'd guessed the boy's true heritage. The boy's face remained carefully blank. Vegeta took this as an affirmative and smirked in satisfaction. I thought so. Well, you don't need to worry about my feelings about my father. He can do whatever he wants when he's in bed, as far as I'm concerned. The Chibi Prince hid his surprise that his father would bed another woman besides his now dead mother. It just didn't seem like him. But there was no other explanation for Trunks' relationship to the royal bloodline. A choking sound brought him out of this line of thought. Vegeta glanced at Trunks and found that the kid appeared to be torn between laughing and dying of mortification. I'm not a bastard, Vegeta, and your father is most definitely not my father. Well then, who is your father? Vegeta growled irritably. For your information, you... Trunks hastily shut his mouth with an audible click. Damn. Nearly got it out of him. Ba-bump, ba-bump. A heartbeat? Bump. Warmth on top of him. Small hands clutching him tightly. Ba-bump. No pain. Where was the pain? Ba-bump. Blackness. No. Wait. He had his eyes closed. Slowly he opened them, amazed that he was able to do even that small act. Was he alive? Or was this the afterlife? Looking around, he found himself exactly where he had been when he had closed his eyes. Goten remained on top of him, tear tracks visible on his dusty cheeks. Asleep. Bardock let his eyes drift around the room, settling on the arguing prince and Demi-Saiyan. Trunks? He asked, confusion evident in his voice. When had the Prince of the Saiyans joined them? Both boys jumped, startled, and whipped their heads around to look at Bardock. Bardock-san! Trunks chirped happily, grinning in a way that reminded Bardock of Goten. You're awake. Beside him, Vegeta muttered something about Trunks stating the obvious a lot today. I am, Bardock agreed, a puzzled look on his face. How? How can I still be alive? Looking again at Goten, he shifted the boy so he could sit up, cradling his grandson in his arms. Goten remained asleep, murmuring something indecipherable. Sensu Bean, Trunks grinned, holding up his other bean for Bardock to see. Vegeta edged forwards a bit so he could take a closer look. The bean was rather unremarkable, just a hard, pale brown lump. Sensu beans have the ability to heal almost anything and bring your power level up to full. He tucked the bean carefully away into his pocket. I forgot that I had them, or I would have given you one earlier. I gave one to Goten, and he gave it to you right before you nearly died. In fact, we thought you had died. I was afraid Goten would lose it when it looked like you'd died. Bardock allowed a moment to absorb this. A being with that kind of power was unlikely, to say the least. But there was no other explanation for how he had suddenly and miraculously been healed. He focused on Vegeta. When did Prince Vegeta join us? He asked carefully. Oh, I kidnapped him and threatened to kill him if everyone kept chasing us. Trunks answered lightly, a faint smirk on his lips. Still disoriented from nearly dying and then waking up to find that he hadn't, the Saiyan muttered the first thing that came to his mind. But isn't Vegeta your father? If you killed him, then you'd never be born. Trunks slapped a hand to his forehead and groaned. Damn it, Bardock! And I've been trying all evening to keep Vegeta from finding that little detail out. Sighing, and leaned against a wall. No help for it now. He is, he said simply, ignoring the bug-eyed stare he was getting from Chibi Vegeta. But his guards didn't know that. The bluff worked, so now we'll be able to get off this planet without any problem. Are you both insane? Vegeta yelled. I don't have a son. I've never even had sex. Bardock frowned as he realized that he'd just blurted out a secret that was probably better off unspoken. Trunks sighed again and rubbed his forehead as though he had a headache. It can't really get worse now. Might as well tell him the rest, he grumbled. Turning to look Vegeta in the eye, his face serious, he continued. Goten and I are from the future. Goten is really Bardock's grandson, not his son, and I'm your son. Goten came to the past by accident, and I followed him to bring him back to our present or your future. Only I guess it's not your future anymore since history's been altered, making this a different timeline than the one that created our time. Bardock noted that the Demi-Saiyan carefully left out any part that mentioned who his mother was, where the two boys had been born, and any mention of just how they had come to the past, and how they planned on returning to the future. He smiled amusedly, thinking that Vegeta probably didn't notice the evasions because of the absurdness of what had been said. Clutching Goten to his chest, Bardock leaned back and closed his eyes. He had his grandson and a second chance at life. He would be able to help him get home after all, and he would be able to spend more time with him. He smiled. It was good to be alive. That was odd. The feeling of impending doom had vanished after only a few hours through the journey home. Raditz still had no idea what had caused the feeling, but it was gone now. Troubled, he decided to remain on the same course, determined to find out what had happened to make him feel as though disaster were looming on the horizon, and how that disaster had been prevented. "Father, what the hell is going on over there?" he muttered, settling back into his cushioned chair, mentally preparing himself for the long ride home. At that moment, the only things Goten felt were peace and safety and warmth. Someone's warm, strong arms were wrapped around him. They felt familiar, but he couldn't figure out whose they were. They couldn't be his dad's, because his dad was in the future. They couldn't be Grandpa's, because Grandpa was... The peace and safety he'd felt vanished like a pricked bubble, and he started to cry again. Grandpa was dead. Taking advantage of the comfort that the person holding him was offering, he buried his face into the other's shirt and sobbed. In response, the man hugged Goten even more closely, one hand stroking his spiky black hair soothingly. "Shh. It's all right, Goten-chan," the man murmured softly. The voice was so warm, so familiar. Why was it familiar? Goten opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was green, sea green. The same green as his G. The same green as the shirt Bardock wore. Goten's numb mind couldn't comprehend what this meant, so he slowly lifted his eyes. Blood. There was blood on the shirt. Some of it was dried and brown. Some of it was sticky and red. Not fresh blood, but new enough that it hadn't had time to dry completely. Maybe the man was hurt, or maybe he'd been in a fight and someone else's blood had gotten on him. Seeing the blood on the sea green shirt tickled something in the back of Goten's mind, but the boy couldn't grasp it. Every time he tried to catch the thought, it slipped away like smoke through his fingers. He still didn't know who the man was, and he would find no answers in the blood on his shirt. He tilted his head to look at the man's face. Breathing suddenly became difficult as his throat constricted. His heart rate increased, and his eyes dilated to tiny points. Then the invisible force that had his throat in its grasp eased up, and he found that he was breathing heavily, almost hyperventilating. He knew that face, those strong, angular features, the black eyes, the spiky hair. Only 3 people looked like that. Himself, his father, and his grandpa. The scar on the face told him that the person he was looking at could only be Bardock. But Grandpa was dead. He'd felt the life leave him, had seen his eyes close, watched as he stopped breathing, heard the heart inside him still its beating. Had it only been his imagination? Could it possibly be true? The face smiled, and Goten realized that he was trembling. His vision became blurry, then cleared slightly as tears fell from his eyes. He tried to say something, but nothing came out. "Hello, Goten," Bardock said, ruffling Goten's hair. Feeling as though his heart was about to burst inside of him, the chibi gave a strangled cry that sounded like an odd mix between a laugh and a sob. He reached up to touch the scar on Bardock's face as though he couldn't believe his eyes. Bardock's smile only widened. It was then that Goten finally realized that it wasn't a dream, that his grandfather really was alive and smiling down at him. He wasn't dead. He wasn't dead. Grandpa! The tears came freely now, but they were a different kind of tears than the ones he had been shedding earlier. He wrapped his arms around his grandfather's neck and hugged him fiercely, sobbing in relief and joy. Now, instead of grief, "Grandpa, you're alive. You're alive." "Goten, you're choking me," Bardock gasped, turning slightly blue in the face. Goten sheepishly loosened his hold on the warrior's neck, but grinned as he wiped the tears from his eyes with one hand. "Grandpa, I thought you died." "So did I," Bardock chuckled ruefully. "But those sensu beans really work wonders, don't they, Goten-chan?" "Hi!" Goten laughed. He looked around the cave, which was lit by a small campfire. Outside the cave, it was pitch black, though that might have been because the roaring waters of the waterfall outside hid any starlight that might have been shining down from the sky. There was no sign of Trunks. "Grandpa, where's Trunks?" "He and Vegeta went outside to discuss some things, I told them they couldn't make a lot of noise inside the cave because you were asleep. Oh. The Chibi Saiyan paused, then looked back up at Bardock. When did Vegeta join us? Last I saw, he was going to fight Trunks. Trying hard and failing to keep a straight face, Bardock replied. That's probably still true. Stars speckled the night sky like diamonds on a black satin backdrop. In the east, a small sliver of the moon was visible, shining faintly silver and blue. A whisper of a breeze stirred the air, which had cooled considerably since the sun had gone down. Night birds and insects chirped and buzzed to each other while nocturnal predators hunted their prey with speed and stealth. Nearby, a waterfall cascaded over a cliff to crash onto the rocks below. The serenity of the scene had no effect on two creatures who stood a short distance from the entrance to the cave where Bardock and Goten were. Trunks' face was the picture of exasperation, while Vegeta only looked pissed off. You're lying, he growled, his tail lashing back and forth behind him. I refuse to believe that you are some half-Saiyajin, half... He paused here because Trunks hadn't told him what race his mother was. Half whatever you are, child from the future, who just happens to be my son. Why would I lie to you, Baka? Trunks yelled angrily. I have nothing to gain by it. I certainly don't want to train under you or anything like that. And I don't want to usurp your throne either. If I am from the future like I say I am, and I am trying to get back home, then it wouldn't even be in my interest to pretend to be your son. Now would it? Besides, if you hadn't noticed, I tried not to tell you who I was. Vegeta fumed. Kuso. He makes too much sense, but it can't be true. It just can't. Sighing in annoyance, Trunks threw up his hands in a sign of defeat. Listen, you don't want to believe me, and I can't make you believe me. I don't have to make you believe me. Nor can you make me tell you the so-called truth. So there really isn't any point to this conversation. So why don't we just go back into the cave and get some sleep? Vegeta looked like he was about to protest, but Trunks would have none of it. He was tired of listening to the bratty prince try to deny the truth. Tired of arguing with him. Tired because, well, it was getting late and he needed sleep. You don't have a choice in the matter, Vegeta. You can either go back to the cave on your own, or I can knock you out right here. Which is it going to be? Glaring, the little prince angrily stomped off towards the cave, waiting until the last minute before taking to the air. It was much more satisfying to pound the ground than to just glide silently. How can he be my son? I am the Saiyajin no Uji. I would never mate with anyone who wasn't Saiyajin, or anyone with hair as ridiculous as Trunks's. And I noticed that he's been avoiding telling me how he and Goten supposedly came to the past in the first place. Why is that, I wonder? Two reasons. Either he doesn't want me to be able to use whatever method of time travel they used, or he never traveled through time in the first place. But if he didn't travel through time, and he is trying to trick you, then why wouldn't he just make up some lie about how he was able to travel through time? An inner voice in Vegeta's mind argued with him. Maybe because he's too stupid to be able to think up a good lie, he retorted. If that were true, the voice said, then wouldn't he be too stupid to think up these other lies in the first place? And you said it yourself. He makes too much sense. Shut up, Vegeta snapped. Just shut the hell up. Surprisingly, the voice listened to him, but the Prince of all Saiyans was unable to dismiss what it had said. It was a very troubled Vegeta who stalked his way into the cave and sat down in a corner. Trunks followed Vegeta back into the cave, his mind lost in thought as he tackled a problem that he just discovered. How am I going to get any sleep tonight with Vegeta here? If we all go to sleep, then what's to stop him from escaping? We need him if we're ever going to get off this planet. Maybe Bardock will know what to do. A gurgling from his midsection caught his attention, and he decided he would talk to Bardock after they ate dinner. Searching through his pocket, he pulled out one of the capsules with food from his mom's pantry. You guys hungry? He asked, looking in Bardock and Goten's direction. Yay, food! I'm starving, Goten chirped happily. Bardock simply smiled. It amused Trunks that, even as the two stood up and Bardock set Goten on the ground, they maintained physical contact by holding hands, as though they were afraid to let go. He supposed he'd act that way, too, if someone close to him had nearly died, only to be saved at the last second. It was still funny, though. I don't see any food, Vegeta grumbled from where he sat. Where are you going to get it from? Pull it out of thin air? The sarcasm in his voice was sharp enough to cut steel. He, too, was hungry, and he didn't appreciate being teased like this. Something like that, Trunks said, smirking in a very Vegeta-esque manner. He pressed the button on the capsule he had chosen and tossed it onto the table. It was only after the capsule had finished decapsulizing the food that he realized he probably should have thrown it to the ground. There was so much food within the capsule that it spilled off the table and onto the floor around it. Oops. Bardock and Goten immediately launched themselves at the food, letting their hands go so they could use both hands to eat. Vegeta just stared open-mouthed, glancing from the food to Trunks and back again. Where did all that come from? He pulled something out of his pocket, and when he threw it down, all that food appeared. But I've never even heard of any technology such as this. What if he is telling the truth, and he is from the future? Hey, Vegetas, Trunks called, interrupting the prince's thoughts. You might want to eat before it's all gone. He, too, sat down to attack the food and satiate his hunger. After another moment of gawking, the chibi prince sat down and started eating mechanically. His thoughts were still trying to cope with this startling revelation. He ate without looking at what he was eating. That is, until he came across it. The substance was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Semi-transparent red, it was held within a bowl and almost seemed alive. It quivered whenever the rock table was jostled, looking like it was trying to escape the confines of its prison. Vegeta stared at it in fascination. Hesitantly, he reached out and poked it with a finger. The stuff jiggled and bounced back, causing the 10-year-old to jump in alarm. Was it trying to attack him? He jabbed it again, determined not to let the creature win. Instead of bouncing back, the creature gave way, letting his fingers slip into the soft, slick stuff it was made up of. His eyes widened in horror as he realized what was happening. He'd heard of creatures that could do this. It was trying to absorb him into its body. Yeah, he screamed in alarm, yanking his hand away from the thing. His other hand formed a ki blast, which he quickly launched at the deadly creature. The red mass exploded, sending bits of itself all over Vegeta and the others, though mostly on Vegeta, since he was closest. The prince screamed again, thinking this was another form of attack. It had divided itself into smaller replicas of its original form, harder to target and destroy, and now it was going to absorb him. He started swatting the jelly-like creatures off him, hoping that he could kill them all before it was too late. This only made things worse. Instead of falling off him like most creatures would when swatted, the jelly creature only smeared itself all over Vegeta, staining his arms and clothes red. It's sucking my blood! He looked desperately at the others, hoping that maybe they could do something to defeat the monster that had been hiding in the food. All three were staring at him as though he were insane, and Goten was beginning to giggle hysterically. What the hell is so funny? Vegeta roared, angered by their reaction. Hee hee, Vegeta ha ha. It's just Jello. Why are you ha ha? Attacking it? Goten managed to say through his laughter. Trunks, too, was grinning ear to ear, while a smile was tugging at the corners of Bardock's lips. Bardock had already encountered the Jello, but he hadn't reacted like this. It's a monster that's trying to absorb me and suck my blood, the distressed prince yelled. How could they take this deadly monster so lightly? Trunks burst out laughing at this statement. Ha! It's only Jello, Vegeta. It's not alive. My mom makes this stuff all the time. It's one of the few things she knows how to make without messing up. Grinning, he reached out and wiped a small blob off of Vegeta's arm and stuck it in his mouth. Cherry, my favorite. Hesitantly, Vegeta licked a finger that still had some of the stuff on it. He didn't recognize the flavor. Cherry, did he say? It actually tasted rather good, even after being ki blasted. Flushing with embarrassment, he sat back down, refusing to look up until he had finished eating. I thought it was alive. I thought it was a dangerous animal when it was only a type of food. I think I'm going to die of embarrassment. That was no way for the Saiyajin no Uji to behave. Remaining silent the rest of the evening, he was able to overhear the conversation between Trunks and Bardock. They were discussing how they would prevent Vegeta from trying to escape during the night. The prince snorted. He held no illusions about being able to get away during the night. In a way, he almost wanted to stay with the trio of Saiyans, to find out for certain if they were really telling the truth or not, and to find out what else they were hiding. There was more to their time-traveling story than they let on, of that he was certain. In the end, it was decided that Bardock and Trunks would take turns keeping watch on Vegeta. Goten wasn't even considered, because they both knew that he wouldn't be able to keep himself awake. Vegeta just lay back and closed his eyes. Somehow, he knew that he would be needing the energy in the morning. Goten once again was using Bardock as a pillow, with Bardock's arms wrapped protectively around him. Trunks remained awake, vigilantly watching over the others, and feeding the fire. In a few hours, he would wake Bardock up. In the meantime, everyone else fell asleep, dreaming of the days to come. With Trunks and Bardock taking turns keeping watch during the night passed and the sky lightened into the soft grays of early morning. Eager to get off the planet and begin their journey, the Goten was up early, making sure everyone else was awake. "Wake up, come on! Sooner we eat, sooner we leave. Wake up, Veggie-chan." Goten was ecstatic at the prospect of being able to go home. Vegeta, however, was more than a little ticked off at being woken up by the Hypergaki. Not to mention that he had just called him that hated name. "Everyone in the solar system is awake, brat," he snarled, shoving the boy away roughly. It wasn't even dawn yet, and he was already in a foul temper. Somehow he had a feeling that this was going to be a long day. Goten took the prince's bad mood in stride. Going over to shake Trunks awake, his purple-haired friend was also awake, thanks to Goten's enthusiastic wake-up call, and his mood was almost as bad as Vegeta's if that was possible. "Couldn't you have let us sleep in a little longer, Goten?" Trunks groaned. "The sun isn't even up." "I waited until it started getting light," Goten protested. "I don't have a clock, so I couldn't tell what time it was." An amused Bardock watched the scene, having been awake even before his grandson since he had had the last watch of the night. Watching Vegeta and Trunks get upset about being woken up so early was especially funny because they looked so much like each other. They even sounded a little like each other because of the sleepiness in their voices. Not that he had ever doubted their relation to each other, but seeing the two snappish children behaving so similarly only proved in Bardock's mind that they were related. Sitting up, Trunks grumpily looked out the cave and saw that even though the sun hadn't risen, it was indeed becoming lighter. Sighing, he rose to his feet. "Well, we might as well get up. No chance of getting any more sleep with Goten around." A rumbling filled the air as, coincidentally, all four Saiya's stomachs growled in unison, causing a minor earthquake. Trunks pulled out another capsule and threw it to the ground. Breakfast was consumed in record time, the sun only just barely beginning to lip the horizon. Much to the amusement of the others, Vegeta avoided the Jello, though he would have fiercely denied that was what he was doing. Tempers were much improved by full stomachs, though Chibi Vegeta was still rather upset by the Jello incident of the previous evening. When the sun was half visible on the horizon, the three Chibis and one adult had gathered in a small field, the only level surface of appropriate size in the vicinity, and watched as Trunks tossed another capsule to the ground. Within moments, the dust cleared and a large spaceship became visible. By this time, Trunks was no longer grumpy, and even the young prince was looking mildly happier. Bardock just stood there, with Goten on his shoulder, smiling happily. There was something about the prospect of going on an adventure that cheered everyone's spirits up. Trunks was about to open the hatch on the spaceship when he tensed, his face suddenly becoming serious. Goten hissed inwardly as he felt it too. The two Demi-Saiyans tilted their heads up to peer into the sky. Noticing this, Bardock looked in the direction they were looking, but couldn't see anything. Vegeta just looked confused. "What's wrong?" Bardock asked. "Can't you feel it?" Trunks whispered. It's ugly," his friend finished for him. "It makes me feel sick." The boy shivered and wrapped his arms around Bardock's head, burying his face in his grandfather's hair. Frowning, Bardock extended his keen senses, looking for whatever it was that the boys were talking about. Straining his newfound senses as far as he could, he finally picked up something. It was far enough away that he only got the faintest impression of it. But that impression was enough to leave Bardock feeling sick to his stomach. It was so dark, so slimy, so evil, it felt like sticking his hand in rancid oil. He desperately wanted to throw himself into the river and scrub himself until he had erased any trace of that foulness. He shuddered. "What the hell are you talking about?" Vegeta growled back to his normal self. "What is everyone so worked up about? Why aren't we getting into the ship and going to whatever damned planet you've been planning on going to?" Glaring at Vegeta, Trunks mentally collected his thoughts. Remember that his father couldn't sense Ki at this point in time. "There's a large Ki coming to planet Vegeta. Not as strong as me or Goten, but definitely stronger than anyone else on this planet, including you, Vegeta." The boys started pacing back and forth, trying to think through how this was going to affect their plans. "And how exactly do you know that?" the prince demanded. They can sense ki, Vegeta, Bardock explained, like a scouter, except that they don't need a machine to do it, and they have a larger range. The 10-year-old stared at Bardock in disbelief, smirking faintly. Bardock added, I can also sense ki. Trunks and my grandson taught me how. That's not important, you two. Trunks interrupted. What's important is that there's a large, evil ki headed this way, and somehow I doubt that it will be letting us get off the planet. It feels kinda like Frieza, Goten chipped in, though I'm not sure cause I only felt Frieza's ki for a few seconds. A cold certainty filled Vegeta, settling in the pit of his stomach like a lead weight. Cold, he said. 20 minutes until the ship has completed the landing sequence, my lord. Good. Very, very good. King Cold gave a smug smile as he viewed the planet that had brought the death of his son. He still didn't know how such a pitiful race of monkeys could have killed Frieza, but he was determined to pay them back in kind. Sipping wine from a glass goblet, he settled back into his chair. He had decided to toy with the Sais a bit before he destroyed their planet. It would be entertaining to watch them futilely throw themselves against his awesome might. He would find their rulers and torture them one by one until they pleaded for death. Of course, he would deny them that death until the very last moment, when everything would burn in a fiery blast of ki the likes of which none of them had ever seen. They would die knowing the utter despair that only a doomed race could know. How fitting that the destroyers of so many worlds would soon have their own world destroyed, and by the ones whom they had been working for when they had wiped out the races of so many planets. Goten and Trunks blinked. Cold? The older of the two asked. What's cold? Scowling, Vegeta snapped. I'm talking about King Cold. Frieza's father. I figured this would happen when I heard the report that you, he pointed, an accusing finger at Goten, didn't destroy Frieza's ship along with the Bakayaro. Now Frieza's father is here, probably intending to finish what his son started. Kuso. Then there's only one thing to do, Trunks stated calmly. We have to stop Cold from destroying planet Vegeta. He pressed the button on the side of the spaceship, causing it to shrink back into its capsule. Picking it up, he put it in his pocket capsule case, then turned to the others. We probably wouldn't be able to make it off the planet with Cold waiting to blow our spaceship up anyway. A determined look settled onto Goten's face. Right. We gotta save the world, Trunks. He took to the air, heading in the direction that he felt the ki coming from. The older Demi-Saiyan grinned eagerly at the prospect of a good fight and darted after his friend. Are they insane? Vegeta asked Bardock. The older warrior couldn't answer, so he just shrugged. Better keep an eye on them, he said simply as he took off, looking back at Vegeta expectantly. Great. I just had to be kidnapped by two brats with a death wish. Now they want to go pick a fight with the father of the strongest creature in the known universe, and I have to tag along. Then it occurred to the little prince that perhaps, just maybe, the two boys might be strong enough to handle King Cold and his minions. He hoped so, because if they weren't, then he and all planet Vegeta was doomed. Knowing that if he didn't comply, Bardock would force him to. Vegeta took off after the foolhardy friends. It was back again, though not as strong as before. The sense of doom weighed down on Raditz's soul as he neared his homeworld. Only 6 more hours until he landed on planet Vegeta. A pessimistic voice in the back of his head told him that, whatever was threatening his father, he would not be able to get there in time to help. He hoped Akemi that the voice was wrong. The sun was now fully above the horizon, pouring its golden light into the valley, where 4 warriors waited as a large, circular ship settled into the soft, fertile ground. Several minutes passed as no one moved or spoke. Then, finally, the door of the ship cracked open and 5 forms emerged. Leaping high into the air, they twirled, spun, and waved their arms around in a ridiculous manner, landing in disturbing and hilarious poses as they shouted out their names. Guldo, that was the short, fat, green one with the 4 eyes. Riku, a tall, bulky, muscled man with a shock of red-brown hair and a stupid look on his face. Jace is short, though not as short as Guldo, orange-skinned, with long, flowing white hair. He was almost petite and probably the best-looking of the lot. Birder, a strange purple-blue-colored reptilian-faced creature, almost as tall as Rekorm, though not quite as ugly. Ginyu, a large, muscled purple man with 2 short, straight horns coming out of the side of his head. We're the Ginyu Force, they yelled in unison. Goten and Trunks burst out laughing, holding their aching sides as they tried to keep from falling on the ground. Needless to say, the Ginyu Force was rather annoyed at their outburst. What's so damn funny? Ginyu demanded, glaring at the two brats. Ha ha! Your poses, they're so funny! He. Goten gasped for air. Yeah, they're even sillier than the great Saiyamans, Trunks exclaimed. Goten looked like he was about to protest this unfair comparison when he was interrupted by Captain Ginyu. What? How dare you insult the Ginyu Force? Do you even realize how powerful we are, you stupid brats? Ginyu fumed. The purple-haired Saiyan smirked contemptuously. Yeah, we know. Pathetic. Oh, Trunks, the black-haired boy yelped, sounding worried. My Nichan told me that Captain Ginyu can switch bodies. We'll have to be careful. Thanks, Goten. I'll keep that in mind, the son of Vegeta said, not taking his eyes off of the 5 fools in front of them. Say, Goten, think I can defeat them all without going super? He asked, too quietly for anyone but Goten to hear, though that wasn't his intention. The youngest boy looked speculatively at the aliens, assessing their strength and dredging up memories of their abilities from the stories. Gohan had told him about them. After a moment, he nodded confidently. Gohan said that Green One, Guldope or whatever his name is, can stop time or something like that when he holds his breath. But you can defeat them, Trunks. I know it. Huh? How did that brat know all that? Ginyu asked his team. Unfortunately, none of his team could give him an answer. Grinning confidently, the purple-haired Chibi Saiyan strode forward challengingly. All 5 aliens stared at the boy as though he had gone insane. Do you have a death wish or something? Janesies muttered in shock. Yup, Trunks chirped cheerfully. I do have a death wish. I wish for your death. Faster than even Captain Ginyu could follow, the boy phased out of existence. The next thing anyone knew, Guldo was down, twitching spasmodically, his neck broken cleanly. Trunks phased back into existence, exactly where he had disappeared, smirking triumphantly. Let's see. Who's next? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. His finger pointed at Requiem. Before the remaining 4 had even had a chance to react to Guldo's death, Requiem too was dead, a ki blast having burned a hole through his chest. Nande Kuso! Ginyu roared in confusion. What is he? How could a child be doing this? We are the Ginyu Force, the mightiest team anywhere in the universe. We cannot... shut up, Trunks shouted in annoyance. That purple guy was really starting to get on his nerves. For that, he decided he would take him out next. However, Berter and Jace had other ideas. The speedster and the pretty boy teamed up and attacked Trunks with a combined effort, startling the boy. Despite the advantage of surprise, though, the Demi-Saiyan was still able to dodge their attack with ease. Gallic Gun. In a bright flash, both of his enemies disappeared, leaving nothing but ashes floating on the wind. Captain Ginyu, the last of his team, gaped at the spot that Berter and Jace had once occupied. His team was gone, killed by a mere child, a Saiyan with purple hair. Vegeta, however, was staring at Trunks in open-mouthed shock. He said, Gallic Gun, that's my attack. I'm the only one who knows how to do it. He must be my son. Trunks had just proven himself to be far more powerful than Vegeta, which the prince had already guessed, but somehow he still hadn't accepted the fact that the boy was his son from the future. The conclusion was inescapable now, though. Trunks was the son of the Saiyajin no Uji. Both he and Bardock remained silent, standing a little ways back from the confrontation. They both knew that they would have little impact on the outcome of this scene, except maybe get in the way if they tried to help. Therefore, they took on the role of silent spectators. Ginyu knew when he was outmatched. He would have fought on, however, if it weren't for the fact that the smallest Saiyan child had somehow known about his secret weapon and had warned the other boy of it beforehand. The Gaki would be on guard against it, which meant that Ginyu had absolutely no chance in hell to beat him. There was only one being that could possibly have a chance against this demon of a child. Before Trunks had a chance to follow up on his previous attempt to kill Ginyu, the purple captain dashed back into the ship to find King Cold. You're saying a mere boy killed the most elite force in the universe. Cold's voice dripped with cutting contempt. And when it came time for you to face him yourself, what did you do? My lord, I came to report to you right away. A Ginyu stammered. I knew that you'd want to know who killed your son. No one else on this pitiful mudball could possibly be strong enough to kill Friedsa. Without turning to face him, The Asujin's tail slashed through the air and wrapped around the unlucky captain. "What you really mean to say is that you ran," the larger creature said in a bored tone as he squeezed the life out of Ginyu. As bones began to snap in the hapless alien's neck, Cold continued, "I have no use for cowards, Ginyu." With a last crack, Ginyu was dead. Cold dropped him to the floor, knowing that some underling would remove the body. He had more important things to do. Ginyu was right in one thing, at least. This purple-haired Seita Jin had to be the one who had murdered his son. It was time he learned that it was a mistake to mess with the Cold family. The last mistake he'd ever make in his short life. Meanwhile, Trunks and Goten were having a small argument. "But Trunks, you gotta fight the Ginyu Force. It's my turn," Goten whined. "Yeah, but they were easy, and the last guy ran off before I got to fight him," Trunks argued back. "Come on, Trunks! Nichin told me that future you gotta fight this King Cola guy when he showed up on Earth. I wanna fight him. Please?" He gave his friend the best sun puppy eyes TM he could manage. "Oh, fine," the purple-haired chibi sighed, scowling. "Have it your way. You can fight him." Yippee! Goten did a little victory dance, ending with a hug for his friend as a way of thanking him. "Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll go super to defeat him. Just like future you did." At this point, the black-haired chibi was speaking too quickly for anyone but Trunks to understand what he was saying, so the reference to the Super Saiyan transformation went unnoticed by either Bardock or Vegeta. It was at that moment that King Cold emerged from the spaceship, making a rather impressive entrance. His sheer size dwarfed all four of them, even Bardock, and his lashing tail whistled through the air ominously. Taking in the four Saiyans he faced, he sneered delicately, then turned to Trunks. "So you're the one who killed my son," he stated. The Chibi Saiyan snorted derisively. "No, I'm not." "Yeah, that was me," Goten confided sheepishly. "It was kind of an accident." He scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. King Cold frowned. This certainly wasn't what he had expected. "Very well then, I'll kill you first," he said lightly. With lightning speed, his tail once again whipped through the air at an intended victim. Impossibly, the small sane child dodged the tail, grinning. The boy got into a fighting stance. Annoyed, the Asujin lashed out with his tail again, only to miss again as the boy took to the air. "Geez, you're so slow," Goten complained. "Don't you have any cool transformations or something that'll make you faster?" Nichan said that Frieza had 4 transformations, and you're his dad. Hissing in frustration, the Asujin narrowed his eyes as the Gaki dodged. Yet another blow. It appeared that perhaps he would have to use a transformation. "Very well then, brat. If you're so eager to die, I'll be happy to oblige you." Goten waited patiently as Cold began his transformation. His body mass decreasing considerably, horns vanishing from his head completely. What remained after the change was complete looked almost like a china doll, with delicate features and black lips. But the power emanating from this monster was even more deadly and vile than before. Goten smiled, looking exactly like his father right before a fight. "Cool. Now I'll transform too." With a yell, a wind kicked up out of nowhere, seeming to center on the boy. Energy sparked in the air, and Goten's hair stood on end. A flash of light nearly blinded anyone who was looking at him. The sky almost seemed to darken as the golden light of the sunrise gathered around the child, creating a dazzling yellow aura. Obsidian eyes shimmered and shifted into a turquoise blue, then back to black. A final yell and another blinding light. When the light finally cleared, Goten was gone. In his place, a boy with the same face but blue eyes and golden hair stood, smirking in anticipation of the fight to come. It was as if a second sun had flared into existence. Bardock shielded his eyes with his arm, unable to look at the source of the light. The air around him literally hummed with energy, the wind whipping his hair away from his face. After a few moments, the light dimmed slightly, making it so he no longer needed to protect his eyes. He lowered his arm, blinking as his eyes tried to adjust to what they were seeing. Golden ki sparkled around the boy, who stood in Goten's place. Wait! Something was wrong with that observation. Bardock once again reached out with his ki senses to touch the ki of the golden-haired boy and found that it was not a different child who stood in Goten's place, but rather it was still Goten, different, but him nonetheless. The differences, though, were enormous. The count of this boy, who was his grandson, almost overwhelmed him, washing against his mind like the ocean against a small and insignificant rock. Unlike Coltrane's sea, coming in contact with Goten's ki was not a mentally degrading experience. Goten's ki was warm and bright and tingly, searing Bardock's soul, and yet doing absolutely no harm to him. It was the absolute antithesis of the energy that Cold gave off. What is he? What happened to Goten? The transformation that his grandson had gone through was unlike any transformation he had ever seen before. When Saints transformed, they became giant monkey-like beings, or Azaru. But to become Azaru, they needed the light of a full moon, or something that simulated it. No such light had been present when Goten had become whatever he was. Something about the transformation tickled the back of Bardock's mind, as though he might have heard about something like this once, but he couldn't remember what he had heard. It can't be, Vegeta whispered hoarsely beside him. He was literally frozen in place, his eyes wide in shock, and was it fear? How can a child, a mere child, obtain that which no Saiyajin has been able to achieve in over 1,000 years? How can a child, who is not of royal lineage, even have the ability, much less the grandson of a third-class warrior? Obviously, he doesn't realize I can hear him, said some part of Bardock's mind, which was not numb with the same shock that the prince felt. He was more amused than offended by the prince's behavior. No doubt he still held the misconception that power was determined by caste. Bardock knew otherwise, of course, because he himself had broken the barriers of caste by becoming more powerful through training and battle than many elites ever dreamed of becoming. Though he tried to hide this fact from those around him. What do you mean, Vegeta? He asked quietly. Somehow, the prince knew what was going on, and Bardock wanted to be let in on whatever it was. Appearing more like the child he was than he ever had before, the young Saiyan Yindo Yuji tore his wide-eyed stare from the spectacle before them and looked up at the older warrior. He is Super Saiyajin, thoroughly startled by the unexpected change in his opponent. Cold stood motionless for several long moments as he studied the differences between the child before and the child who now faced him. Lacking the ability to sense ki and having no scouter, he had no way of knowing his young enemy's strength. But the evil king had complete confidence in his ability to defeat any opponent. His son must have been careless when he had faced this child, and so had paid for his mistake with his life. Cold would not make the same mistake as Frieza. The Isijin looked at the boy with curiosity and contempt rather than fear. That, as he was soon to find out, was a big mistake. Fascinating light display, he sneered. Tell me, does it do any good? More than you know, Goten smirked. He waited calmly for Cold to make the first move, knowing that if he attacked first, it would probably catch the tyrant off guard and kill him before the fight had a chance to play out. That would be no fun. Well then, let's see how well you do. With a look on his face that almost seemed jovial, if it weren't for the hint of sadistic pleasure that flickered in his eyes, the Isijin attacked, flying forward to hook a fist into the Saiyan boy's stomach, knocking the wind from the pathetic monkey. Or that's what was supposed to happen. In reality, the boy slipped past his Colt's fist, gliding through his defenses, and jabbed a small elbow into the lizard's side. Without pausing, Goten followed through with a one-handed chop to Colt's back, slamming the creature into the ground. A small crater formed where the Isijin landed. Despite the aches these attacks gave him, Cold was by no means finished. Rather, he was furious, angry with this Gaki for even being able to hurt him. He launched himself back into the fight, this time adding more power to his punches. If this kid thought he could humiliate him, then he had another thing coming. Super Saiyajin, a myth, a legend, almost an impossibility, and yet he was seeing it manifested before him in this 8-year-old half-Saiyan. No wonder he was able to defeat Raditz. Thought Vegeta, almost bitterly. How did I ever think I could defeat this child? He could kill me with a flick of his finger if he wanted to. Clenching his fists, he squeezed his eyes shut to block out the sight of glowing form before him. It isn't fair. If anyone were to become a Super Saiyan, it should be me, not some half-grown, half-breed, third-class child. I am the Saiyajin no Uji, descended from the legendary Super Saiyajin himself. Anger flooded through his veins. How dare he surpass me? How dare he become the stuff of legend before me? It is not right. Opening his eyes again, he came to the realization that there was nothing he could do about it. Goten was worlds beyond Vegeta in strength, so it didn't matter that he came from a third-class lineage. His frustrated anger vanished like wind-chased fog, and his head sagged. He knew that he was sinking into a depression, but he didn't care. There was no need for a Saiyajin no OG anymore, not with someone this strong around. Strength was everything to the Saiyan race, and one of the things that had kept the Vegeta family in power, aside from their greater strength and potential, had been the fact that they supposedly had descended from the legendary Super Saiyan. Now a Super Saiyajin had appeared, and he had not come from the royal family. One of the basic foundations of Vegeta's authority, his life, had been stripped from him. The young prince had never been so close to tears in his short life. "What's wrong, Vegeta?" a voice said softly, startling the prince out of his thoughts. Trunks had backed away from the fight at some point. Noticing the glum look on his chibi father's face, the Demi-Saiyan had decided to find out what the problem was. "Goten is Super Saiyajin," Vegeta despaired, hanging his head. "I am the prince of all Saiyans, and yet the grandson of a third-class soldier has outstripped me, has achieved the legendary status before me. I am left with nothing but an empty, meaningless title." A tear formed in the boy's eye, then slowly trailed down his jawline until it fell to the ground. "All my life, I have been the strongest, though at times others were stronger. They always knew that, when I grew to be their age, I would surpass them. Without status, I am nothing, Trunks. Don't you see?" Vegeta lifted his head to stare at Trunks, with wide, haunted eyes. The sight of his father, no matter how young, so visibly wounded and vulnerable, disturbed Trunks. He was used to his father always striving to outdo Kakarot in his family, always raging against the fact that the idiot third class and his spawn kept managing to surpass him. But Miri Vegeta had never given up, never accepted defeat. In Chibi Vegeta's eyes, that was what he saw, defeat. Trunks could not stand by and let his father be defeated like this. "In the future," he said quietly, "you are a Super Saiyan too." Vegeta blinked, caught by surprise. "I am a Super Saiyan?" Trunks nodded, smiling ruefully. "I don't know if you're the strongest. Somehow your fights with Goku or Kakarot always get interrupted before an outcome is determined. But," he added with fierce pride, "I know that you never accept defeat, that you always work to become better. In my eyes, that makes you as strong as any Saiyan ever born. I'm proud to call you my father." Stunned by this admission, Vegeta could only look at Trunks in wonder. "He is stronger than me, and yet he is still proud of me. How?" "Keep in mind, Vegeta," his future son added, "that Goten and I are from the future. It only makes sense that we're stronger than the normal Saiyans of this time. Besides, in our time, you're even stronger than me, or Goten." The last part was said with a huge grin. Gratitude, an emotion that was almost foreign to the prince, even at this young age, filled Vegeta's heart, and again he came close to crying. With his words, his son had just saved Vegeta's pride and sanity. "Thank you, Trunks," he whispered. "He's stronger than I thought." Goten was close to panic as his face once again came in contact with the rocky landscape. Groaning, he picked himself up off the ground, wiping blood from his split lip. Almost before he could react, cold was on him again, fists, feet, and tail sending blow after blow to rain down upon the boy. It was all he could do to dodge and block most of them, wincing as every once in a while a blow landed. So when he saw an opening in the Isujin's defenses, he quickly took advantage of it by sending a large ball of ki into Cold's face. While the lizard was distracted by the pain, Goten brought himself into a familiar stance, cupping his fists, the heels of his palms touching. Ka! Blue energy sparked in his hands. Me! He pulled his hands to one side, the ki gathered, growing exponentially. Cold was focusing on Goten again, quickly recovering from the surprise and pain of the last attack. Mia. The ball of blue ki was huge, almost too painful to hold anymore. Just a little longer, now. As Cold blasted towards the young Saiyajin, Goten thrust his hands forward, launching the attack. The bright blue beam shot forward, slamming into the lizard's chest before he even had a chance to dodge or block. Screaming, the Isujin was blasted into the ground, plowing a trench 100 meters long. Panting heavily, he readied another Kyoblast, preparing to send it after Cold. Unfortunately, he never got the chance to use it. At the edge area where the fighting was taking place, Trunks, Vegeta, and Bardock watched closely. Only Trunks could see everything that was happening, since King Cold and Goten were traveling too fast for the other two to see most of the time. However, they all saw Goten crash into the ground with earth-shattering force. Despite the strength of Goten's Kamehameha, Cold had recovered with impossible speed, phasing out of existence before Goten could send another attack his way. He phased back into existence directly behind the young boy, and brought his doubled-up fists to smash into the back of Goten's head. Goten's in trouble, Trunks worried, gnawing on his lip. I didn't think Cold would be this strong. In his mind, he weighed his options. Should he rush to his friend's aid, or should he wait and see if Goten would pull through? Does he need our help? Bardock asked, unknowingly echoing the chibi's thoughts. Trunks watched the fight pensively as Goten struggled to keep up with his opponent, taking more blows than he was landing. No, he answered reluctantly. Goten's not finished yet, and he'd be mad if we thought he was too weak to handle this guy on his own. Feeling dizzy from his bone-jarring impact with the ground, the injured Demisaiyan picked himself up and shook his head, trying to clear the stars from his vision. Big mistake. Instead of clearing his vision, more stars appeared and he nearly fell back down as a wave of pain beat inside his head. So stupid, he berated himself. I knew better than to let my guard down after I attacked. Baka, baka, baka. Rubbing his sore head, he hastily erected a ki shield as Cold bombarded him with hundreds of small energy blasts. Defending against this left him feeling drained and exhausted. Can't keep this up much longer. The barrage of ki stopped and Goten looked up to see why Cold had stopped. The Asujin was slowly advancing on him, his tail swishing back and forth lazily. Goten's mouth suddenly felt dry. If King Cold reached him, he knew that it would be over. In a last desperate attempt to delay the outcome he foresaw, Goten charged up his strongest Kamehameha, pouring everything into it. If this didn't work, he didn't know what he would do. His hands shot forward and the deadly energy sizzled through the air, straight towards its intended target. Trunks held his breath as he watched Goten prepare a final attack. This was it. This was the deciding point of the fight. Dazzling blue light reflected off of everything, blinding anyone who tried to look directly at the source. Through his geek senses, the purple-haired boy felt the attack fly towards the Asujin with blurring speeds. Cold wasn't moving. Surely he wouldn't be able to dodge the blast. It was too fast, and he wasn't doing anything to get out of the way. He was just standing there, placidly watching his death speed towards him. Lifting one hand, the alien batted the blast away. Straight towards Trunks, Vegeta, and Bardock. Sinking to his knees in shocked horror, Goten could only stare at the rising cloud of dust billowing from where his friends had been standing when the blast struck. Frantically, he searched for their ki and found nothing. Not a trace or whisper of ki could be felt from the smoking crater. No, he screamed, guilt and loss tearing at his soul. All of his power had gone into that blast, and Cold had deflected it, sending it flying towards his friends. Vegeta and Bardock were too weak to have even had a chance to survive. Had Trunks been powered up enough to live through it? If so, then where was he? Goten couldn't find his friend anywhere. With his heart in his throat, he realized that not even his best friend had survived the attack. His attack? No, he screamed again, his voice raw with emotion. Vegeta, Trunks, Grandpa, what have I done? With a wordless cry of grief, he blasted towards the crater, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, they had survived. He slammed into a wall headfirst, falling onto his rump. How had a wall suddenly appeared like that? Dazedly, he looked up and found King Cold standing over him, smiling frostily. Oh, what a pity. You killed your little friends. How sad. The lizard's voice oozed with false concern. Sobbing, the Demisaiyan blinked back tears and got to his feet. The Asujin's tail whirled through the air and slammed into the boy's side, knocking him down again. Tears of pain and loss sprang to his eyes as he once again pulled himself to his feet, ignoring his protesting muscles and bleeding wounds. Perhaps it was the stress of being lost in the past, for the past 4 days. Perhaps it was the grief from losing his grandfather twice in as many days, or the guilt from being the cause of his friends' deaths, or anger at his tormentor. Perhaps it was merely the physical pain he was enduring. Perhaps it was a combination of all of these things. Whatever it was, it caused something in the innocent, sweet, caring boy to snap, and he almost seemed to visibly change before Cold's eyes into something far more deadly and powerful. His power skyrocketed to levels he had never bothered to reach for. He didn't know what the attack was. It just came instinctively. Gathering his newfound energy into his fingers, his arms stretched out. He was only half aware of what he was doing. The kits in his hands flared a brilliant golden color. The color of the sun dawning on the horizon. The color of a Super Saiyan in all his glory. The color of King Cold's death. He clapped his hands together, and the golden kits of each hand clashed, combined, and suddenly released itself in the tyrant's direction. Still yelling, Goten poured everything into this nameless attack. His grief, his anger, his loss, his pain, his soul, everything he had was directed at the being who stood before him. For a moment, the only thing that could be seen was the luminous light of Goten's attack. It consumed everything until the whole world was a golden color. And then it was gone, and so was King Cold. Utterly spent, the youngest child of Goku dropped out of the Super Saiyajin form, his hair changing back to its original black color, eyes becoming the obsidian windows of his soul once more. He was unconscious before he hit the ground. Fear momentarily flickered through Trunks' mind as he saw the Kamehameha wave flash towards him. The blast would kill him, Bardock and Vegeta, he knew, unless he did something. Flaring into Super Saiyan, he mustered up every ounce of speed he had and grabbed his chibi father and Goten's grandfather, racing away as fast as he could manage. Even so, he nearly didn't make it. Constructing a hasty ki shield, he managed to protect himself and the other two from most of the damage the explosion caused. He landed a good distance away, panting heavily as he set Vegeta and Bardock down. That was close. He glanced at the other two to make sure they were all right, only to find them staring at him. What? What's wrong? You're a Super Saiyan too, Bardock gaped. Goten and Trunks are both Super Saiyans. Unbelievable. What? You think I'd let Goten become a Super Saiyajin and not be able to myself? Trunks was incredulous. I am, after all, Vegeta's son. Beside him, Vegeta was grinning like there was no tomorrow. That's right, Trunks is my son. Anything else that might have been said was cut off as a flash of golden light flooded the air and blinded them. The world was golden, filled with a deafening roar as the pure energy of Goten's attack crashed into his enemy. Barely audible amidst the cacophony was his wordless cry, heard despite the distance that separated the trio from him. Then it was over, and the world returned to normal. The silence that ensued was almost as deafening as the roar that had preceded it. His ears ringing, light spots dancing in his eyes, Trunks carefully picked his way over to the newly made valley. His mind echoed with questions as he peered through the settling dust. What was that attack? I've never seen anything like it. Where did Goten find that strength? Did he win, or did he quickly stop thinking, unwilling to acknowledge the possibility that Goten might have lost, instead concentrating on searching through the rubble? Behind him, Bardock and Vegeta silently searched in other parts of the crater. A flicker of sea green caught his eye. Rocks and debris that had been lifted into the sky during that last awesome attack had fallen on top of the child, but part of his green gate was still visible. Hey guys, I found him, he shouted as he rushed over to push the rubble off of his friend. Bardock and Vegeta quickly joined him. Lying face down in the dirt, his clothes torn, tattered, and singed, Goten's body was badly bruised and cut, bleeding from dozens of wounds. Bardock reached out and turned him over gently, then picked him up and tenderly cradled his wounded grandson in his arms. He's still alive, he said simply, gratefully. Though just barely. Maybe you should give him that senzu bean, Trunks. Trunks smiled, relief written clearly on his face, and dug a hand into his pocket in search of his last remaining senzu bean. Bardock smiled as he watched the wounds on Goten's small body vanish as if they had never been. There was still blood all over him, and his clothes were torn beyond repair. But his grandson was once again whole. He lifted a hand and plucked a leaf from Goten's hair, brushing a stubborn lock of hair away from his eyes as he fondly recalled the past few days. What have you done to me, Goten? He silently wondered. Before you came, I was half mad with grief and filled with the need for revenge for my team. I don't think I really knew love until I met you, at least not this kind of love. The only love I'd known before you was what I felt for Jean. Now that I've met you, I can tell that what Jean and I felt for each other was only one kind of love. Having this new kind of love makes me realize how empty my life has been up until now. You've changed me, Goten, and I think it's for the better. As the senzu bean finished its work, Goten opened his eyes, completely healed. Confusion played across his face as he looked up at Bardock. And I dead, he asked, puzzlement in his voice. Laughing with genuine amusement, Bardock shook his head. Goten, you're not dead. Why would you think that? Relief and joy slowly crept over the boy's face at this revelation. I thought I killed you, Grandpa, and Trunks, and Vegeta when I was fighting with Cold. So I thought that if I could see you, and you were dead, then I must be dead too. He became thoughtful as he thought about this. I'm glad I was wrong. He smiled suddenly and hugged Bardock fiercely, who returned the hug with equal enthusiasm. Bardock chuckled. No, you didn't kill us. Trunks became a Super Saiyan and pulled us out of the way of your attack. Which reminds me, he trailed off, giving his Hyzen a look of mock sternness. Yes, Grandpa. Why didn't you tell me you were a Super Saiyan? Scratching his head with one hand, Goten gave Bardock a sheepish look. Well, we can all go super. My dad, my brother, Vegeta-san, Trunks. I guess it kinda slipped my mind. It just seems natural. Bardock blinked owlishly at his grandson. My son and my other grandson can both become Super Saiyans, too. Goten nodded. The warrior set the boy down and stood up, a stunned duck on his face. Koso, this is gonna take some getting used to. He shook his head ruefully and gestured to his left. Goten shifted his attention to the direction his grandfather was indicating. The ship that Trunks had brought with him, that they had been about to use before Cold had shown up, gleamed in the morning sunlight. Trunks and Vegeta are inside, checking to make sure everything is in order. We were just waiting for the Senzu bean to finish healing you before we took off, which hasn't been that long, actually. Those things really work fast. As they ascended into the ship through the open hatch, Goten's small hand sought out his grandfather's larger, calloused hand and clasped it tightly. Again, he had nearly lost his newfound family, bringing him once again to the realization of just how important Bardock had become to him. As they silently walked to the pilot's room, Goten determined that he would do everything in his power to make sure that he would not lose his grandfather, ever. You know, the government on planet Vegeta probably won't let you leave the planet, Vegeta informed Trunks. Once they realize you are attempting to escape, they will no doubt move to stop you. The purple-haired boy looked up from the console he was bending over. I figured as much. That's where you come in, Vegeta. I can call them and tell them that I have you prisoner and that if they don't leave us alone, I'll kill you. Or you could go back to your palace, take charge, and order them not to bother us. Then you wouldn't have to come with us. He hunched back over the console, typing in the coordinates of the planet Namek. They had agreed that, since Namek was closer to planet Vegeta than Earth was, that would be where they would go to gather the Dragon Balls. Looking thoughtful, the young prince stared off into space for a moment as he contemplated these options. I do not wish to become king just yet. He looked at his future son with eyes that were almost pleading. I wish to go out and do things, to explore and have fun. If I become king, I will not have the luxury of being able to be myself. He paused, forcing himself to swallow his pride. If it is all right with you, I would like to come with you to have one last adventure. Bardock and Goten had entered the room in time to hear this last bit. The three exchanged glances, then nodded slightly in unspoken agreement. We'd love to have you with us, Trunks grinned. He became sober again as he added, but we still need to figure out how to get off this planet without having half the army on our tails. If I order them from here not to follow us, they might think that I was merely trying to make up an excuse to go off on an adventure. They would send someone after us to bring me back. Vegeta mused, perhaps your plan of claiming me as a hostage is the best one. Bardock would have to be the captor, of course, as no one would ever believe that two children were capable of holding me, the Saiyajin no Uji, prisoner against my will. Bardock grinned at the irony of this statement. Working together, the trio of criminals and the captive prince hammered out the details of a plan. With their plans made and their destination set, the four Saiyajin prepared to take off. Bardock keyed in the frequency to call the planetary government. Well, let's get this show started, he murmured as he pressed the talk button, bringing the screen to life. A fierce-looking man, who looked like he would be more at home on a battlefield rather than behind a communications console, appeared, scowling at the person who dared call him. Planet Vegeta government. The man sounded like he desperately wanted to blow something up and would take any excuse to do so. Asu, Bardock said cheerily, I just wanted to tell you guys that I have Prince Vegeta hostage, and if you don't let my ship get off planet, I'll kill him. He waved at the flabbergasted official, grinning broadly. To Trunks and Goten, he had never looked and sounded more like Goku. It was very hard not to giggle at the scene. Nonini, the warrior official glared daggers at Bardock. Who are you? Why should we believe you? A thoughtful look appeared on Bardock's face. He tilted his head to one side, placing a finger on his chin. Well, I won't tell you who I am, but I will prove that Vegeta's my hostage. Saying this, he stepped aside and pulled a bound and gagged chibi Vegeta in front of the screen. The 10-year-old prince gave his captor a look of pure venom as he struggled with his ki-absorbing bonds. Behind him, Bardock grinned impishly and lifted Vegeta out of the way. See? Now, all I want is to get off this planet without being stopped by a patrol force. I'll leave His Royal Highness somewhere with a communicator and he can get in touch with you. Deal? Glowering angrily, the official turned away from the screen to address someone they could not see. Apparently the sound had been toggled because, while they could see the Saiyan's lips moving, they could not hear a word that was said. This went on for several minutes until someone replaced the official. Joy. Yet another ticked-off veteran of war. How do we know that you will keep your word? The new official asked suspiciously. You don't, Bardock chirps. He was feeling particularly cheerful right now. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that he had just been given the chance to thumb his nose at the damned government. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that he didn't expect to ever see his homeworld again. Whatever the reason, he felt like leaving with a huge, goofy smile and a cheeky wave of his hand. And maybe an inappropriate gesture while the kids weren't looking. But you don't exactly have much choice, do you? Silence reigned for several long moments. Finally. Fine. You have permission to leave the atmosphere. And if I see any ships leave the docks, Prince Vegeta gets a one-way ticket to the next dimension, Bardock added. Suddenly serious. Fine, the official growled. None of our ships will leave the planet or any docking bays. Making sure the chibis in the room couldn't see, Bardock cheerfully gave the official an obscene gesture, then switched the transmission off. Well, looks like we're on our way. Still in a good mood, he walked over to Vegeta and undid his bonds. The nameless government official glared at the blank screen. Glancing at the display that showed the progress of the criminal ship's departure, he suddenly noticed that there was another blip, an incoming ship. He smirked. They had promised to allow them to leave the planet, and not to let any ships leave the docking bays, but they had not said anything about ships that were already in flight. It wasn't as if they could control the destination any ship that just happened to come into the system. A short time ago, he could only stare in wonder at the second sun that was glowing down on the planet's surface, visible even from this distance. He had tried to get a reading on the odd energy source, but the circuitry of the key detection device had blown as soon as he had targeted the power. What could be so powerful that it was able to overload a ship's scouter? And what was it doing on planet Vegeta? He was almost certain that it had something to do with the ominous feelings he'd been getting. As soon as the light winked out, the sense of dread also disappeared, leaving behind a mystery in its wake. What have you gotten yourself into now, father? He pondered silently as he checked the clock on his console. Only an hour before he landed on the planet. Then he would be able to find some answers. Settling himself back for the wait, he tried to take a nap to pass the time. The 15-year-old Saiyan must have succeeded in dozing off because the next thing he knew, he was receiving a transmission from the planet Vegeta government. He frowned as he flipped the switch that would enable him to hear the speaker on the other end. Why would the planet Vegeta government and to talk to me? He asked himself in bewilderment. This is Raditz. Raditz, this is the planet Vegeta government, a gravelly voice replied. You are hereby ordered to pursue the ship exiting the atmosphere on Vector 2073, 31016. Prince Vegeta has been taken hostage by those on board the vessel. You are to proceed with caution, as the kidnappers have threatened to kill him should they be aggressively pursued. You are to follow them at a discreet distance, observe where they go, and rescue the prince should the opportunity arise. Planet Vegeta government, out. The transmission ended abruptly before the Saiyan boy even had a chance to ask any questions. The prince has been kidnapped. Who could be powerful enough to hold Prince Vegeta hostage? Very few people have that kind of strength, and most of them are loyal to the Empire, frowning. Raditz thought back to the odd light and the power reading, or the effect trying to read its power had on the scouter he had witnessed only half an hour ago. On a hunch, he checked the coordinates where the light had appeared and compared them to the extrapolated launch coordinates of the ship escaping on Vector 27-3. They were the same. What does this mean, though? He wondered. The ship holding the prince came from the same place as the key. That key, I feel, has something to do with the premonitions or whatever they are that I've been getting about my father. What do? Do I pursue these criminals that hold my prince hostage and who might have something to do with my father? Or do I disobey my orders and land on the planet to search for Bardock? He weighed the choices before him carefully. My father may need my help if he was anywhere near that key, but my prince definitely needs help. Sighing, he reached out and began altering his flight vector to match that of the fleeing ship. Duty to his prince outweighed duty to his father. Besides, he had no way to know for certain that Bardock is in trouble. The troubling feelings has disappeared again, and he didn't know when or if they would return at all. His father would just have to take care of himself for now. He had been doing that for many years without Raditz. Raditz figured Bardock could keep doing so for a little while longer while he took off after the prince and his captors. The adolescent boy groaned as he checked the star charts to see where they were going. There was nothing polluted anywhere along the route for several hours of travel. It looked like he was going to be stuck in his ship for a long time to come. Great. Just great. He pondered on whether or not it would be worth it to engage the sleeping gas, but decided against it. After all, he never knew if his quarry would change directions in mid-flight. Since they were escaping criminals, he suspected that they probably would change course at least once. It looked like he was going to have a long, boring, and sleepless flight. "Hey, Trunks," Goten whined from his bunk bed. "I'm bored." On the upper bunk, the purple-haired Demisaiyan heaved a sigh and rolled over to peer over the edge of his bunk down at Goten. "Yeah, me too. There's nothing to do." "How much longer till we get there, Trunks?" Goten looked up at Trunks, yawning widely. They had already been traveling for most of the day, changing course every so often to make sure no one would be able to track them to Namek. This, of course, had lengthened the journey considerably. "Probably another few hours, Goten," his friend replied. "Hey, maybe we could play a prank on someone." His voice had suddenly become excited and a large grin spread across his face. "We haven't done anything like that in days." "Great idea, Trunks," the black-haired chibi cheered. "What should we do? How about we play a joke on your grandpa? I know my chibi dad would be fun, but we've never done anything to Bardock before. This'll be fun. Not having any other ideas." Goten quickly agreed, and together the two troublemakers plotted the mischief they were about to make. While the two boys schemed about ways to play pranks on Bardock, the Saiyan in question was currently standing bare-chested in his room wearing only the black pants that he'd been wearing for the past few days. In his hands he held the tattered and bloodied green shirt, staring at it slightly despondently. He wondered if it was even possible to return it to a semblance of its former state before all of the mayhem he'd been pulled into had damaged it. The fabric itself was intact enough that it might be salvaged, but he had no idea if the bloodstains would ever come out. Dropping the garment on his bed, he headed for the bathroom. Maybe there was something in there that would work. Within the bathroom, he discovered a cabinet with a wide variety of containers. Shampoo, conditioner, deodorant. Wonder what that is. Damn, I can't read any of this. I guess it's all in whatever language they speak on Earth. Well, since they're being stored in the bathroom, they're probably things used to clean things. He grinned at his deductive abilities and grabbed several of the bottles. One of these things has to be able to remove blood. It didn't occur to him that maybe he should just ask Trunks or Goten what they were. He stepped through the door of the bathroom and headed for his bed, where he'd left the shirt, intending to get straight to work on restoring his shirt. However, when he reached his bed, he discovered that he wouldn't be able to clean his shirt after all. The green shirt had mysteriously disappeared. Bardock looked around suspiciously, certain that he had placed the thing on the bed only a few minutes before. Suddenly he heard a faint scuffle coming from the closet, where he supposed a normal passenger would store their hurls. He didn't have any extra clothes, so the closet was empty. Or was it? Grinning, he walked over to the closet door and opened it. He smirked in self-satisfaction as two small bodies tumbled out of the closet with horrified looks on their faces. Goten was holding an open bottle of something in one hand, the cap in the other. Trunks was clutching the missing green shirt to his chest. Both boys gulped. "He found us, Trunks," Goten wailed, dropping the bottle on the carpet. In an instant, the pale blue carpet began to turn a neon pink color as the liquid within the bottle spilled out. The two tried to dart past Bardock in an attempt to escape, but somehow Bardock managed to snatch them up by the backs of their shirts. It was then that the two chibis noticed the reckless grin on the older warrior's face and the flicker of something akin to insanity in his eyes. "I think we're in trouble," Trunks thought in panic. That's the same look Gohan got when we showed up at his school and blew up the cafeteria. He shuddered as he remembered what Gohan had done to them. "What were you two boys planning on doing with my shirt, Bardock's smile only broadened as his captive squirmed in his grip. "You do realize that's the only shirt I have, right?" There it was again. That crazed gleam was in his eyes, making the smile on his face that much scarier. Goten was trying his best not to melt into a puddle right there, his own eyes wide in terror. Bardock's gaze shifted from the mischievous duo to the green shirt that Trunks still held in his hands. Or, rather, what had once been a green shirt. Streaks of pink stained the fabric in a crazed swirl that, after a moment, Bardock realized made a pattern of sorts. Symbols from that Earth language he had read on the bottles in the bathroom decorated his once green shirt. 4 of them. Body AK, his eyes hardened. "What does that say on my shirt?" If it was possible, the two boys paled even more and began to stammer incoherently. "Well, I'm waiting. It says Baka," Grandpa Goten whispered. "Oh," that was all he said as he contemplated what to do with the two. Taking his silence as an indication of impending doom, Trunks figured that the best thing to do was get the heck out of there. Flashing into Super Saiyan, he pulled free of Bardock's grasp and grabbed hold of Goten by the arm. Goten, catching on to his friend's plan, also went super. "Run away!" they shouted in unison, darting towards the exit. In his haste, Trunks dropped the once green shirt before he vanished through the door. Bardock picked up the shirt and sighed. Looking over the shirt, Trunks had unconsciously taken his stress out on the thing, leaving holes from his fingers and tears from being twisted too hard in some places. Added to that were the tears and singe marks from the fight with Nappa, along with the bright pink letters that spelled out Baka. All in all, the shirt had been rendered totally and utterly unwearable. Great, now what am I going to wear? He'd have to track down his grandson and his friend later on after he thought up an appropriate punishment. It wouldn't be too hard to find them. After all, they would be stuck on this ship for several more hours, and there weren't exactly that many places to hide. It was definitely a good thing Raditz had kept himself from falling asleep. The ship he was following changed course so many times that, if he had not been awake, he would never have been able to track them. Now they were approaching a green planet, and he guessed that they had finally reached their true destination. Checking the star charts, he found that the planet was one called Namek, inhabited by peaceful green bipeds with fairly high Ks. Other than that, there was nothing of interest on Namek-sei. That's odd. Why would the prince's kidnappers stop here? Unless they mean to drop him off for someone to pick up, no. Surely not. Why go to all the bother of taking the Prince of All Saints hostage if you only intend to let him go? There must be something more to this planet than the records show. If so, then I intend to find out. But if they do mean to abandon the prince here, then I will need to pick him up. Either way, it looks like I'll be landing. So far he had managed to keep from being detected by the other ship, keeping a respectable distance which had made it difficult to keep up. In the end, Bardock had tossed the shirt in the disposal and had opted to just go shirtless for the time being. Like he had much choice. Still, he supposed he should be grateful that Napka had a moderate climate. A light breeze swirled over his broad, muscled chest as he inhaled the fresh scents of the new world. Beside him, wearing shirts with the letters B, A, K, and A painstakingly dyed in pink, the contrite duo took in their new surroundings as Vegeta smirked at them. Since he had not been a party to the prank, he had been spared Bardock's punishment. It was rather amusing to see the brats plucking self-consciously at the shirts Bardock had told them they had to wear for the entire time they were on Napkin, which meant, of course, that they would be wearing them when they wished themselves back home. It really was hilarious. Well, let's get started then, Bardock stated as he finished examining the world around him. He didn't let it show, but on the inside he was wrestling with his emotions, forcing himself to come to terms with the facts. Soon they would have the Dragon Balls gathered, and the wishes could be made. Trunks and Goten would return to their time and their families. Vegeta would return to planet Vegeta, and Bardock didn't know what he would do. He couldn't imagine life without Goten in it anymore. The child had somehow found his way into his grandfather's heart, and permanently lodged himself there. When he left, there would be a huge gaping hole that the Saiyan didn't know if he would ever be able to fill, Goten had come to mean the world to him, and he was about to lose him. Still lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice as Trunks pulled out the dragon radar and pressed the button. Nor did he notice the frown appear on the Demi-Saiyan's face. He did notice, however, when Trunks spoke up, his voice filled with worry. Guys, I think we have a problem. The dragon radar isn't picking up anything." Surprised out of his depressing thoughts, Bardock turned his head to look at the boy quizzically. "What does that mean?" "Well, one of two things, neither of which is a good thing. Either the Dragon Balls here are dormant, or," he inhaled slowly, attempting to calm himself, "or the dragon radar is broken. If it's broken, I don't know if I'll be able to fix it." It was obviously that last possibility that worried him the most. "Why exactly are we looking for these Dragon Balls, anyway?" Vegeta asked, raising one regal eyebrow. "Because Dragon Balls grant wishes, and me and Trunks are gonna wish ourselves back where we belong," Goten explained. "That's how we got here in the first place. We used the Dragon Balls. I came here by accident, because I didn't say my wish right. Trunks came because he wanted to help me." "They can grant wishes?" the young prince asked, stunned at the prospect. Goten nodded enthusiastically. "But you have to have a dragon radar to find the balls." That dashed any hopes he might have had of finding these Dragon Balls himself. Oh well, it had just been a thought. Trunks peered off into the distance, frowning in thought. Maybe we could ask the Elder of the Namekids if the Dragon Balls are just dormant. If they're dormant, they wouldn't show up on the radar. Come on, I can send some Namekids this way. They'll probably know where to find the Elder. The 9-year-old chibi capsulized his ship, then took to the air. One by one, the other three followed him as they sought out the one who might have the answer to their question. Mixed feeling played through Bardock's mind during the journey. If the Dragon Balls were dormant or the radar was broken, then that obviously meant a delay, whether permanent or temporary. And Goten's departure. Goten would be trapped in the past for that much longer. However, that would also mean that Bardock would be able to spend more time with him. While it saddened him that Goten would not be able to see his family for however long it took to fix their current problem, part of him was pleased that maybe, just maybe, he would be able to keep his beloved grandson just a little longer. Raditz stepped out of his pod and looked around at the world he had landed on. Seeing nothing of immediate interest, he turned his scouter on and began to track the keys of the prince and his 3 captors. Locking onto the prince's signature, the young man took off in the direction the scouter said they were. Perhaps he would find the opportunity to rescue the prince from the criminals. Then his job would be done and he could return to planet Vegeta and to his father. He frowned as he remembered that these criminals might have something to do with the large key that had appeared on planet Vegeta and seemed to be linked to the feelings he had been getting about his father. Maybe he would find more than just the opportunity to free Vegeta. Maybe he would also find some answers. There was only one way to find out, though. With the wind flying through his hair, the 15-year-old boy sped off after his quarry, keeping low to the ground. They weren't traveling at a particularly fast rate. In fact, it looked like he would overtake them in a few minutes if he wasn't careful. He slowed down. Now was not the time to run into the criminals. He only needed to be close enough to observe them until the chance to do something arose. With these thoughts in mind, Raditz grinned. The hunt was on.